Hey guys, and welcome back to another match preview and prediction. Ben Shelton versus Jack Draper for the Indian Wells 2025 quarterfinal. Let's get into it. Before we do though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Also, do make sure you click that notification bell. Make sure your notifications are on so you get alerted to all new uploads. Okay. This is a really interesting matchup because they've never played before. Two very big serving, big hitting lefties. Both are relatively similar age as well. And they're looking to, stamp their authority in this first ever matchup. Look, the conditions, we're going to talk about the conditions. We're going to talk about how they've looked so far. And then I'll talk a bit strategically how I think it might play out. I mean, there's not going to be a lot in it, if I'm being honest, in terms of the strategy and the weaknesses that are exploited, because both have relatively similar games. They're not exactly the same. But what that does mean is that it's going to come down to really who executes their game plan better than the other, if I'm being completely honest. If we talk about Ben Shelton, he's played Argentinian Navone, Hachanov and Nakashima en route to this quarterfinal match, and all won in straight sets. Looked pretty comfortable, if I'm being honest. Some big serving, including 151 mile per hour serve, I think it was, which actually was returned, and he lost the point. It wasn't the hitting zone of the player, but I mean, still incredible return. I think it was against, I want to say Navone, or maybe Navone. For Jack Draper, he has had a much harder route, I'd say. Played Fonseca in the first round, beat him in straight sets, including a bagel, very impressive. Then also beat Brooksby, who has been looking pretty good. And interestingly, he actually beat Taylor Fritz, who is Brooksby's fellow compatriot, of course, in straight sets, and exactly the same scoreline, 7-5, 6-4. So he's been looking really good. Fritz, of course, we know how good he is at Indian Wells, former champion. Draper likes the hot conditions. I mean, he likes it out in Australia. He likes it at the US Open, especially. And the US Open, the hard course is slightly slower. You get a bit more bang for your buck with heavy topspin strokes, and you get a bit more time as well to set up on the forehand. And I think he prefers those conditions, if I'm being honest. And it actually puts him in good stead coming into the clay court season. For Ben Shelton as well, look, I wouldn't have thought that this would be his favourite surface or one of his favoured surfaces, a slow hard court. But what I will say is that I think the crowd, and it being in America, does definitely increase his level by 5, maybe even 10%, if I'm being honest. I think he really is a crowd, I don't know if it's called a crowd player, but he is a player that definitely is affected by the type of crowd that is at the match and the atmosphere and environment. I feel like he's able to up his level in those environments. Some players, their level dips because they don't enjoy it. Others, it stays the same. And that's, I guess, the best scenario, that it doesn't fluctuate much at all, because you're just able to play this kind of constant level and you're not relying on the atmosphere, environment, etc. But I do think Shelton does get that a bit of extra motivation when playing in America, and especially at tournaments like Indian Wells. In terms of then how it might play out, so we know that, look, I mean, Shelton's got a bigger serve than Draper, and that's pretty safe to say. But actually, I would say and argue that Draper's effectiveness on serve, maybe the way that he's able to hit his spots on serve, is actually better than Shelton. And I actually think the slider out wide from Shelton, from the ad side, or from the ad court, is arguably better than Shelton's, which is a pretty big call to make. I think Shelton serves better down the tee than Jack, and he's got a very big kick serve as well. I mean, bigger than Jack's as well. I think Jack is a slice better, but the kick serve is, I think, it's huge from Shelton. I mean, it really does jump, and on these courts, he gets a lot of purchase on it. Then if we look at the other aspects, I mean, look, both have very big forehands, different forehands. Shelton's is, it's a long lever, very flat stroke at times, which he likes to really hit through, almost with a kind of bent arm. At times, very interesting forehand. But then he also goes into Nadal mode where he whips it cross court. Jack doesn't quite whip it as much, but I think generally actually hits with more topspin than Shelton, I'd say, on that forehand side. On the backhand side, both have pretty flat backhands. But again, I would actually argue that Jack has a slightly more spin than Shelton potentially. Although actually, when I think about it, I think Shelton potentially might actually, because Jack hits a very, very flat ball on the backhand, and I talked to one of his former coaches, and that was the idea when developing his backhand. So yeah, his backhand's very flat, so I'd say Shelton hits with a bit more topspin on that side. In the forehand to forehand and backhand to backhand exchanges, I think it's relatively even. I would say that Draper has better shot tolerance generally, but Shelton has a bit more power, probably a bit more, I would say, he's got more, that's a very strange phrase to use, he's got more winner ability from the back of the court. He's got more, he's got more of an ability to, I think, hit winners from the baseline than Jack. But Jack's forehand down the line is the best out of the bunch, I would say, out of all their shots off the ground. I think it's such a good shot, especially on the run. It's a phenomenal shot that he hurts righties with so much. And it's going to be even more effective against Ben. And then on return, I think, both players have something to be worked on there, but that is serviceable at the moment. Both have really good hands in the net coming forward. I like they like to transition as well, and they're willing to come forward, and they should, behind such big serves, behind the sort of shots they're able to hit. And then the last thing is really movement, and both move really well. Draper in the past has been, I would say, an average mover. I think he's now into that bracket of world-class mover. I wouldn't quite say he's elite yet, but he's not that far off. Shelton is a world-class mover, I think, and has been for quite some time. He's very athletic. And Jack's now at that stage where I think he matches Shelton, at least in terms of physicality. So in terms of predictions, I think it's going to be 3 sets. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a couple of tiebreakers. I do actually think that Jack will edge this one just because of the conditions. I think the conditions are slightly more suited to him. I think he'll be able to dictate in the points more than Shelton would like. And I think we'll see a few errors from Shelton in some of those big moments. Let me know in the comment section below who you think is going to win and why. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you on the next video.